Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. We are presented and brought to you by FanDuel. Got my guy, Zack Guggenheim, with me, and special guest in this episode, Doug Lesmerises of the Bill and Doug Show, formerly of Kings of the North. Doug has been doing a great job covering the Northern football, and not just covering the Northern football, but making sure that we know the truth about those dirty, dirty football teams down south. And as we all know,
Starting
that's
hot.
something we that's something we enjoy doing here on the Big Ten Huddle as well. So, Doug, welcome. Thank you for giving us your time and being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Glad to be here.
So we have some questions we're going to get to with Doug. We're going to ask a little bit about his time with Kings of the North and what he's doing now, and then also get through the Big Ten versus SEC stuff and some more teams. Zack, first question to you, my man.
Yeah. So Doug, I've followed you for a while, back Buckeye Talk, and then you did Kings of the North. Now you're back on the Ohio State beat. What led you back to just covering Ohio State? But then has that changed your perception of the North and how you take up the fight for the North still?
Yeah.
So two-parter.
Just hold on for 1 second. Hold on for 1 second. So I do still have my swords. So just so people know.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, just because your show changes doesn't mean you leave your swords behind. So I had covered Ohio State football from 2005 to 2023. And then we started this Kings of the North college football show where we covered 28 Northern college football teams. And then that stopped. And it's kind of like asking James Franklin, why did you decide not to be the head coach of Penn State football anymore? And it's like, well, I don't know if it was James Franklin's decision. So Kings of the North ended, and right before the season started, and we were kind of looking for an outlet. So Bill Landis and I, we were the co-hosts of Kings of the North. And so we started our own thing. So we are on Substack, BillAndDougOSU.substack.com, covering Ohio State. We have a YouTube channel, The Bill and Doug Show. But we still, I want to keep at least a foot. Actually, I want to keep at least a sword in Northern college football. And so we do a playoff show on Tuesdays where we talk about national college football. We do Ohio State picks on Thursdays. We do national picks on Fridays. We do an Ohio State postgame show on Saturdays, but we've also done a separate kind of national postgame show. We did one after Penn State, Oregon. We'll continue to do that. So, we were honestly we were scrambling a little bit to figure out what we were going to do. And this is a very loyal, dedicated Ohio State audience that I am lucky enough to have a relationship with. And so we decided to focus on that. It's great to be back, in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center covering Ohio State on a weekly basis. But my opinions about Northern college football, about national college football haven't changed, and they haven't gone anywhere. I do a rant show every Tuesday where I'm complaining about something, and it's often related to the South and national college football. So if anybody who liked that content, who liked the Northern stuff, there's a good chunk of it on the Bill and Doug Show, and you can find that on YouTube, and you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. And then on the Substack that we do, that's really Ohio State focused, and we do a bunch of Ohio State shows on the YouTube too. But the other thing too is Columbus is the capital of Northern college football. So to be at this place covering this team, Ohio State, is a fascinating lens through which to view all of college football, the Big Ten, Northern college football, the Big Ten versus SEC kind of thing. So, when you're covering Ohio State every day, you're not very far removed from the national fight that we also enjoy, that you guys enjoy, and that we're all a part of.
Yes, we do love the national fight, and we think you are both one of the best representatives for Northern football, but you do such a great job of covering Ohio State too. So awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a very lucky to be able to cover a team like this and for a fan base like this, but then also Northern ball is kicking butt lately, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
Well, they are, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the national media recognizes it enough, in my opinion, Doug. And so I appreciate that you do still have shows where you acknowledge that. You go on rants. I had a episode that I did myself on the James Franklin interview and just talked about how absurd it was and how much propaganda there was, similar to what you said. But you said it very well as well, and did a very good job of articulating your points. And
Yelling,
I'm
just yelling.
curious. Yeah, well, yelling gets the point across as well. But so we're going to focus more on kind of the Big Ten here, although I do
Sure.
agree that there is, a bias toward the northern or toward the SEC and Southern football that's kind of against the Northern football teams. But how do you feel about the national media's, portrayal of the Big Ten specifically versus the SEC this year? Because I have friends that cover the Big 12 and they say, why do you guys complain? You guys always get the benefit of the doubt. You guys, it's the Big 12, it's the ACC that gets the scrums. And I could not disagree more with that, because you look at the facts, you look at the data, and right now the Big Ten is not being treated the way the SEC is. I'm curious your thoughts on how it's gone so far this season.
Yeah, it's weird because I get where the ACC and the Big 12 are coming from. And there's certainly, I think those conferences rightly perceive a Big Two, right? And they're worried about, they're angry about being big-footed by the big boys who they think maybe want to leave them behind entirely. So I totally get where they're coming from. But like, I don't think the SEC and the Big Ten are friends. And I kind of don't want them to be friends. I actually wish that the Big Ten had chosen to fully lead the resistance against the SEC and ESPN and said to the ACC and the Big 12, like, come on, fellas, here we go. We're going to be the three conferences trying to put up a wall against ESPN and SEC trying to take over the sport. And instead, the Big Ten kind of threw in with the SEC. So sometimes it's like, it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. It's sort of like keep your friends close and your enemies closer kind of thing. Like, maybe the Big Ten is trying to fight the SEC from the inside, right? So I get all of that, but I do agree with what you're saying. And I think the issue is that during the Saban run, when Alabama was dominating college football, the SEC was top heavy, and the SEC tried to tie itself to Nick Saban's success at Alabama and act like everything Saban and Bama are doing, that represents the SEC. And it's like, that doesn't represent the SEC. That represents Nick Saban, right? But it was a top heavy league, and they tried to rope themselves and tie themselves to that. Now, the Big Ten is clearly more top heavy than the SEC because the SEC has no top. I don't know who the best team in the SEC is. I guess maybe it's Texas A&M. If you try to tell me it's Alabama, like, please explain losing to a terrible Florida State team. And also, like, they probably should have lost to Missouri and these games that Alabama has played. I think Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana would all win the SEC. Does anybody disagree that Oregon would win the SEC? And so now the SEC, they change. Like so much of what happens in society now, if you don't like the argument, you change the argument and you change the facts. So now they know they cannot win a top of the league argument. They've kind of admitted that Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana are better than everybody. So they go straight to depth, and they try to somehow twist the strength of Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon that maybe nobody else in the Big Ten is going to beat those teams. It's possible that Ohio State and Indiana are going to go undefeated in the Big Ten, and Oregon's only loss is going to be to Indiana. And they're going to use that to say the SEC is deeper. So that the real problem is that for whatever reason, Vanderbilt and Tennessee and Ole Miss and LSU and South Carolina and teams like that in the middle of the Big Ten, in the middle of the SEC, are propped up, and they're propped up in the rankings in a way that Minnesota and Illinois and Washington and Iowa and USC and all these two-loss Big Ten teams are not. And I swear to you, I promise you, Washington is Ole Miss. But Ole Miss was 5 last week, and Washington was unranked. And then Ole Miss loses to Georgia, and that's a sign of SEC strength. And Michigan beats Washington, and that's a sign of Big Ten weakness. And that's the thing, that the SEC is great in the spin room, man. So then folks like us, we're just trying to fight the spin. But the real issue right now is that I think nationally, And I worry, like the AP poll, complaining about the AP poll is low-hanging fruit. I was an AP poll voter for a long time. People do the best they can. They aren't paid for that. It's not their full-time job. They're trying to get their ballot in by noon on Sunday. If we want the AP poll to be better, there are ways to make it better. And it starts with giving people more than 8 hours on no sleep to do their ballot. So that's the AP's fault. But the issue really is the discussion around it and the way the SEC and the way a lot of the way ESPN and a lot of national shows talk about the sport. I don't know if it's going to matter with the committee because like it didn't matter last year. There's all the complaining in the SEC about Indiana. The committee put them in. So I don't know if it's going to matter. But in the meantime, in the perception fight, they're wrong. They're wrong. Right. And they are using a skewed argument to promote SEC depth when actually I think the Big Ten is as deep.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, Doug. I just fired off a tweet and I'd be curious to hear your thought on this. If Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon were in the SEC, we would be arguing eye test, not resume.
Yes. No, 100%. But then also, so I agree with that. But also, why are we arguing Ohio State's resume? Illinois is 5-2, Washington's 5-2, Minnesota's 5-2. So like, but somehow those wins don't count. But I'm supposed to be so impressed that Alabama beat Missouri and beat Vanderbilt. Who'd Vanderbilt beat? Tell me why Vanderbilt is good. Vanderbilt's best win is over LSU. Well, tell me why LSU is good. LSU's best win is over Clemson. And all we do is talk about how lousy Clemson is, except when Clemson is propping up LSU. It's all like it's a house of cards. So just explain to me why some like that kind of argument. South Carolina stinks. But people in the SEC will point at South Carolina and act like beating South Carolina is something and beating Maryland's nothing. Washington going on the road to Maryland, getting shut out in the first half against a pretty good Maryland defense with a young quarterback who's playing pretty well, Malik Washington, and then rallying in the second half and scoring on every possession to pull out that game on the road 2,500 miles from home. That's a good win for Washington. There's not a person south of the Mason-Dixon line. They would club you in the head if you tried to claim that winning at Maryland was a good win. But then they will look you dead in the eye and tell you how hard it is to win at Mississippi State. So, like, that's the kind of thing that it's just that, like, it's not on equal footing. And they argue a set of facts that is based on the past. They argue a set of facts that is based on who went in the NFL draft in 2017. And it's like, that's not the world anymore. And I'm sorry.
Well, and I've argued this for a long time, which is that just because you have more talent, on your team does not necessarily mean that you are the better team, right? You can have a bunch of talent on your team, but if you don't have a good coach that doesn't know what to do with that talent, I mean, there's a number of coaches that are getting fired right now. Billy Napier's one of them who, and I'm not trying to disparage Billy Napier here, but he was somebody that he was somebody that got a whole lot of talent on his team, but he was never actually able to do anything with it. It's just like if there's somebody who has millions of dollars out there, but they make poor investments and they're loose with their money, guess what? They're going to be as, broke as me or more broke at some point in their lives. And I think a lot of it goes back to, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Doug. I think a lot of this goes back to the preseason rankings, because I hear what you're saying about the AP poll, and you make a very good point with that. But
careful.
I think
careful with where you're going.
I think sometimes we get caught in this perception of what everything is at the very beginning of the year, and the SEC teams, they beat somebody and then they lose. They don't move down far enough to get unranked, but then they beat somebody again. I was just talking about it on the show. I think LSU is probably going to beat Texas A&M this weekend. And you know what's going to happen when that happens? LSU is going to get propped back up, probably make it back into the top 15, and Texas A&M is going to maybe drop in the top 10 or something, and it's just going to be one more opportunity for more SEC teams to be ranked and to increase that perception of them. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what do you think is the solution?
Well, that was going to be my next question to you. Because at this point, I don't know what the solution is, because it feels like ESPN, Fox, they're all trying to fight the fight, but ESPN just has so much of a louder voice and a bigger reach than everything else that, and also they have the tradition of what the SEC has been.
Yeah. So I didn't know if you were going to go with like do away with preseason rankings, because that I am staunchly on the opposite side of that, because preseason rankings serve a purpose. How would we know that James Franklin is 4-21 against top 10 teams or whatever it is if we didn't have rankings, right? It's like, well, Ohio State, like what's Ohio State's record against number one teams all time? It's like, well, they played that Texas game, but we did away with rankings, so we don't know. Like, you need it for history. You need it for benchmarks. You need it for context. So like, if you want to reform the AP poll, I can reform the AP poll in 5 minutes if the AP would listen to me. So like, could the AP poll be better? 100% it could be better. It could be better. It's like one of those things. It'd be an email, not a meeting. You don't like, it's so clear how to do it. But I don't think we have to do away with it. And then the other thing is, does it matter for the committee? And people claim all these things. It's why the Big 12 did away with its preseason poll, because they thought the preseason poll was having a negative effect on whatever. BYU was picked near the bottom of the Big 12 last year. And when they were 9-0, they were like 5th in the AP poll. They were getting respect. It was just that like the Big 12 had a bunch of kind of like weird losses, and like Arizona State had a weird loss in the middle of the year at Cincinnati when Sam Leavitt was hurt. And like, that was the issue. It wasn't the preseason polls. And so I am like, every now and then there's a goofy AP poll vote and people are yelling at a poll voter who does not get paid to do it. Right? It is an honor and a privilege, and I viewed it as such when I did it. Did I view it that way at 3:00 in the morning when I was trying to go to bed after writing 5 stories for my actual job, and I couldn't go to bed because I knew I was going to sleep late and my ballot was due at noon on Sunday for some ungodly reason? Why? Because like the world would stop if we didn't have the AP college football poll out at 1 on a Sunday. So it matters for this. Right. And then you have to use it the right way. I reacted negatively to a Wall Street Journal story this week because I think they were talking about the SEC eating itself. And they're using, I think, the AP poll as evidence. The AP poll isn't evidence of anything. The AP poll is for history. It is not for right now. So anybody who is saying like, well, Missouri's ranked 17th, that means the SEC is good, and Washington's ranked 28th, so the Big Ten sucks. Like, just bury your head in the sand. You're useless. You're a bag of bones because you have no functioning brain cells, right? Like, that's not what it is. Let's have like a realistic discussion. But I think a lot of the national shows, which lean South and lean SEC, I think the discussions are actually disingenuous. Yeah. And so it's like with anything. When somebody's wrong, I'm always curious about, are they ignorant or are they evil? And do they know they're wrong and they're saying it anyway? Or do they just not know? Oh, man, it's not their fault. They just don't know that Minnesota is actually pretty good. Or are they just like blind to it? They don't want to know. They choose to be this way and go all in on like why Garrett Nussmeier is going to win the Heisman. Can we have another SEC preseason quarterback hype machine blow up in our faces? Is Carson Beck, Garrett Nussmeier, and Arch Manning enough, or do we need more? Lenore Sellers, if I heard another sentence about Lenore Sellers in the preseason, I was going to tear my ears off. How's Lenore Sellers doing? Is South Carolina 2-5 or 1-6? What am I so impressed by? So I don't worry. It's not the rankings; it's the perception. Yeah. The rankings are a reflect. I think the rankings are more a reflection of perception. So it's one of those, like, the perception is what makes me mad. It's not the rankings that make me mad. But then when people who are supposed to be educated college football journalists are using the rankings or gospel, that's when I get extra mad.
Well, and how are you supposed to, be an educated football journalist when, like you said, you're covering a game the entire day before? You're probably doing stuff for your job. You might be doing a podcast as like kind of preview for a game, and then you're writing 3, 4, 5 stories after the game, and then you're up at 3 a.m. and you maybe got a chance to watch 2 or 3 football games that day. How can you actually vote on that? I completely agree with you. That's one of the biggest issues with it.
So like the issue is too is like they try to get beat writers. Like that's their intention. Mm-hmm. So like they go by how many FBS teams are in a state, and then they try to match up that number of voters from that state for that number of FBS teams. So whatever it is in Ohio, it's like 9 or something, right? I think there's 3 voters from Ohio, and I voted for a long time. And then like I got like a little bit of attention for a while because I started resume voting. And so if I didn't care who you were, I didn't care what your previous results were. I did resume voting. But part of the reason I did resume voting, it's like, well, what about eye tests? It's like my eyes haven't seen anything. Like I have to do resume voting because what else do I have to go on by noon on Sunday when I was covering my team? Because they don't have enough national people vote. Now that I'm more like, I don't go to games as much, but I'm watching everybody. I would be a much more educated AP poll voter right now, but that's not who they want or have in the poll. Like Reese Davis is a voter. There's probably like, out of 66 voters, there's probably 5 or 6 who are national people, and everybody else is a local team voter who has no chance to be as educated as they want to be. They wish they were more educated, and they can't be. And so that's when you get a ballot. It's like, well, I had this team number 8. They lost. I'll move up number 9 one spot. I'll move up number 10 one spot, because you don't have time to do anything else. But then the real answer is, then why are smart people who observe the sport like hell-bent on acting like the AP poll is gospel?
Yep. I really appreciate, I think, everything you're saying. If I can maybe shift us a little bit to the number 1 team in the AP poll, Ohio State. There are some that would say, particularly SEC-minded people, that because Ohio State hasn't been tested, we really don't know much about them. What do you have to say about the fact that they're 7-0, they're allowing less than 6 points a game on defense, and Julian Sayin legitimately looks like a Heisman contender? What is your perception right now of the Buckeyes?
Yeah. So again, that's a typical SEC argument. It's like, oh, Ohio State hasn't played anybody. It's like, well, the reason you think they haven't played anybody is because the number 1 team in the country from your conference has fallen apart. So like the SEC's incompetence is now a black mark against Ohio State, while they're also ignoring the 3-5-2 teams that they've beaten. I think it's a very mature team. I think it's a very poised team. I think that defensively, I think they're like second in the country in not giving up explosive plays, and they make you work your way down the field and assume you're going to make a mistake. And then they have a bunch of guys like Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs and Arvell Reese, who are tremendous athletes, but also tremendous football thinkers who make life very difficult on you. And so it is much less of a kind of a more of a boomer bust defense than what you saw with Jim Knowles, where that was sort of like the whole thing of, he wanted to blitz, and is an inopportune blitz. And obviously was very successful. Like, it's very tempting for Ohio State fans, especially for the way things have gone at Penn State, to now be like, we do Knowles suck the whole time. And it's like, well, that's not actually true. That's not fair. Like, that's revisionist history to some extent, but to a large extent. But this is very different. And I do think they have some really intelligent football players who are playing at a high level, and Matt Patricia is using in a really smart way. And then Julian Sayin's on pace to set the record for the best completion percentage in college football history. So the efficiency of that passing game, and we've talked about, we've asked Ryan Day a million questions, a million different ways about, do you want to be more explosive? Do you want to have more explosive plays? But again, I think they're pretty mature about taking what's there. Nobody's going to let Jeremiah Smith get deep, so then Carnell Tate can get deep now and then, but they're using, Jeremiah Smith is still in the top 5 in the country in targets because they're getting him the ball on short and intermediate routes, trying to get him the ball in space. Their run game has to come around, but I think Julian Sayin, and this is, we did a big Julian Sayin Heisman case show this week. If you just gave Julian Sayin's season, if Texas was undefeated, if Texas was Ohio State and Arch Manning was Julian Sayin, they'd be carving his name in the statue yesterday. It would be over. And Arch Manning was the number 1 quarterback recruit in his class. Julian Sayin was the number 1 quarterback recruit in his class. Mm-hmm. And he is the quarterback of the undefeated number 1 team in the country. And it's sort of like, hey, everybody, do you think he should be on your Heisman ballot? And they're doing straw polls, and it's like Ty Simpson is getting first place votes, and Julian Sayin's getting he got 5 third place votes out of 22 ballots in the straw poll. And it's like, what are you looking at? So I think, and this is one of those, I try to be very cognizant of this. I think anyone who has followed my coverage of Ohio State, I'm not a homer. Most of the time people yell at me for not being more of a homer. But I think national media is terrible at analyzing Ohio State this year. And I think they are A, bored by Ohio State, and B, Ohio State is playing methodically. They play as slow as any offense in the country. Their defense does let you move the ball down the field a little bit and then stops you. They're not forcing a ton of turnovers. They don't have a million highlight plays. And then people see that like Ohio State's only ahead 7-3 at the end of the first quarter, and they think Ohio State's struggling. And it's like, actually, Ohio State's had a drive and a half, and they're moving the ball right now, and they're going to win by 30. And so I think the national media has no idea what to do with Ohio State. But if they were Georgia, people would be crowning them already.
Mm-hmm. Good words. Good points.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong at all. I mean, and the Heisman, voting and everything is kind of one of the things that annoys me the most right now. I literally just watched on CBS today, an analyst there had Diego Pavia, Ty Simpson, and then the combination of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, apparently as his top three,
Here,
Heisman trophy.
Get the sword. Get the sword.
I might as well. I wasn't aware you could vote for duos in the, Heisman trophy right now, but apparently that's the thing. Another team in the Big Ten that has somebody who I think he's getting a little bit more recognition for the Heisman Trophy because they did beat Oregon, and it was at Oregon, and Indiana's a really good story this year. And I think that the national media loves stories, right? To your point, Ohio State is not they're not like a juicy story right now. It's like, yeah, this team won the national championship last year. They got a whole bunch of young players, and they're probably going to win again this year unless Indiana or somebody, sneaks up on them and gets them. But this Indiana team has had an amazing season. Last year was an amazing year. A lot of people kind of discredited him and said, oh, it's just a one-year thing. And Zack and I told him, we said, look, we don't think they'll go 12-0, but they're going 10-2. They're going 11-1 at the very least. Turns out they might go 12-0 at this point. I appreciate that they do get some love and attention from people. You're not getting them, I like we just talked about rankings. I get it, but we're not seeing them talked about as like the third best team in the SEC by most people. People acknowledge that Indiana is a team that is for real this season. What is your thoughts on Indiana this year and then the perception that they've been getting from the national media?
Yeah, I don't know. There's the SEC doesn't talk about Indiana anymore because there's nothing else to say. They sure talked a lot about it in the offseason. They sure talked about it a lot last year. I actually had Indiana 8-4 this year. I didn't think they'd fall off a cliff, but I thought their schedule was that degree more difficult. Road trips to Oregon and Penn State, a bunch of games. Again, we talked a lot in the preseason. We just thought the middle of the Big Ten was as good as it has ever been. That Illinois game I thought would be tough for them. Obviously, it wasn't. They went like 11-on-11 on both sides of the ball, straight up with Oregon, and were in the fight in every way. There is nothing fluky about that win. We certainly had questions going into that game about whether Indiana would hold up on both sides of the ball in the offense and defensive lines. Their offensive line did hold up. And then you look at the guys with the ball in their hands, Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper Jr., and Roman Henby and Keelan Black. And like their skill is as good as anybody out there, probably outside of the Ohio State receivers, right? Like Elijah Surratt's unbelievable. And then Fernando Mendoza, is obviously a step or two or three above Curtis Rourke. Curtis Rourke was second team All Big Ten last year, was an unbelievable story, did a great job getting Indiana to the playoff, but he's not an NFL quarterback. And Fernando Mendoza, people talking about is like he's a QB1 in the draft. So when you do that, and then you have all Big Ten level players at all three levels of the defense, like it's all there. They're missing nothing. They are a complete team, and obviously they are incredibly well coached. And then to keep both coordinators this offseason, right? That Bryant Haynes was a guy you thought I think Ohio State maybe took a little look at him as a defensive coordinator, and then to keep him around, to keep Mike Shanahan around calling the plays. Obviously that staff believes in Kurt Cignetti. Indiana has monetarily invested in that program. And we just did a show on the Bill and Doug show that's going to go up tomorrow morning. We were running through how many teams do you actually think could win the national title? My co-host Ari Wasserman joined us for that. Bill and Ari were around 9. I had 6. I only had 6 that I thought could actually win it, but all three of us had no hesitation saying, yeah, we think Indiana could win the national title. And if we get an Indiana Ohio State 12-0 Big Ten title game, buckle up, baby.
That'll be fun.
Will be fun.
I am loving the idea of, Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon all there in the top 4, and that whole idea of that happening. It'll have to happen the right way with the seeding, but overall, I think that the Big Ten is shaping up for another good year in the playoffs, especially if they only get 3 teams in, which unfortunately that's what it looks like is most likely going to happen right now. I don't think it's the fault of the Big Ten. I think it's more the fault of national perception and everything. So any final thoughts or anything, Doug, before we get out of here?
No, it's just like the thing that we've been really focused on is like there's that battle. I think there's 8 teams with 2 losses right now in the Big Ten, and there's 3 showdowns this weekend: Iowa, Minnesota, Northwestern, Nebraska, and Washington, Illinois. And all 3 of those losers are out of the playoff picture because they're not going to make it with 3 losses, but the 3 winners are in. And like I think that's just really exciting for college football, for those fan bases. Here we are in October, and those games really matter to the context of the sport. But I think the Big Ten's hope for a 4th team is probably there are a bunch of 2-loss teams. USC, Iowa, Minnesota, and Washington all play Oregon. And all 4 of those teams currently have 2 losses. So if any of those 4 run the table, including beating Oregon, and finish 10-2 with the win over Oregon, I think they're in. Now, then my co-host Bill is like, well, then is Oregon in? Is 10-2 Oregon in with a loss to Indiana and a loss to one of those teams? And I think Oregon's reputation, the way the committee would view them, the way they're blowing people out in a bunch of their other games, and the fact they are going to play a bunch of I think they're going to have a bunch of wins over 8, 9-win teams. I do think Oregon would still be in. So that's the scenario, I think, to get a 4th Big Ten team in. But that Notre Dame win over USC really hurt the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Because now we're talking about well, USC beat Michigan, and then USC couldn't even beat Notre Dame. But Illinois beat USC, but now that good Illinois win is lessened because USC beat Notre Dame. So if USC had beaten Notre Dame, I think the Big Ten would be in a really good spot for 4, and now it's tougher.
Yeah. Can you imagine a 11 seed Oregon though? My goodness, that would be rough for whoever plays them in the first round.
Well, that's one of those things. I know there's that kind of thing's going to happen because there's going to be really good teams that lose some screwy games. And so I know last year it was oh, poor Oregon. They had to play Ohio State as the 8 seed. It's that didn't have anything to do with structure. That had to do with Ohio State losing a game it shouldn't have lost to Michigan. Yep. So you get one of these really good teams losing a game they shouldn't lose. And all of a sudden, when they should be the 3 seed or the 5 seed, they're going to be the 9 seed or the 11 seed or something. And they're going to be somebody's nightmare. But that's how sports works. And so if you want to win the whole thing, you've got to beat everybody anyway. But yeah, give me 11 seed Oregon against the 2 seed SEC champ. Let's go. I like the Big Ten's chances.
Doug,
I love that.
Doug, where can people follow you at on I know you said Substack. Where can we all find you guys?
Yeah, so if you want to subscribe to our Substack, BillAndDougOSU.substack.com. You can try it out for free. It's Ohio State coverage. So if you're an Ohio State fan, you'll love it. If you're not an Ohio State fan, maybe it's not for you. Twitter at Doug Lesmerises, Lesmerises. But the Bill and Doug Show on YouTube and on every podcast channel, it's free. The Bill and Doug Show. There's Ohio State shows on there, but there's a lot of shows that are me shouting about the stuff I shouted about here. And so you'll find it. You can tell by the headline of oh, do I care about this one? Maybe not, but this one seems shouty. I'll listen to that. So go ahead and subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on your podcast feed, and come check us out when you like the title.
Yeah, if you see on there rant in all caps, you know you're about to get into a good episode there. So go check out Doug.
Do you think I should put sword in the headline sometimes?
Yes.
Yeah, the sword emoji. Yeah.
I think you need to have a graphic just with you holding the sword, and that could be the thumbnail.
It just feels good to get it back in my hand. You know what I mean? I don't have it in my hand as much as I used to, and I appreciate you guys reminding me to get it out, baby. I'm going to go polish this thing right now.
Absolutely.
Get it ready for battle.
We'll tell you what. Go polish it, and the next time we have you on, you can show us how nice and shiny it is. Sound good?
Yeah, I'll show you some moves. Yeah, I'll work on it.
There we go. There we go.
All right. Hey, that's going to end this episode of the Big Ten Huddle. We appreciate everybody being here. Check out Jeff's coverage on a Friday morning. You can catch that. And then also Around the Big Ten just got posted earlier today, so you can find that as well. Great Big Ten football and Big Ten basketball coverage here at the Big Ten Huddle. We appreciate you watching and listening. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.